This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Hi guys, good morning, good evening. Hope you are able to see my screen. Are you able to hear me, guys? Okay, great,
Yes.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So let us move on. Okay, so what we discussed so far is mostly about the virtual machines, right? And we discussed how do we create a virtual machine, how do we convert that into an image and deploy machines using the image that which we created. And then we did also see how do we add additional components, right? So whatever the components required for us to increase the disk space or adding the additional network card and so on, right? So these are few things that which we had discussed about virtual machines. So there are still few more things that which we have to look at, and then we'll move on further to the networking, maybe from tomorrow onwards, if time permits, and we'll be able to complete most of the pending items today. Then we'll start the networking part tomorrow. Okay, so we'll again come back to the virtual machines because there are few high availability and other concepts that which are there. Once we are done with the networking, we'll again switch back to the virtual machines and networking and load balancing combined, right? So that's how we'll move on. So yesterday, when we were when we are done with the class, we were having some issues with attaching network interface card, right? Network interface card, which is a secondary network interface card, which we were assigning. So what did we do? We created a network interface card and then we attached it to the VM, right? So it seems that the VM which we allocated yesterday wasn't powered off properly, so that's the reason we couldn't able to do it. What we will do is today we'll continue our class with that. Okay, so let us quickly go to the network interface card, and then you can create a network interface card from here, right? That's what we had seen. So there's already a network interface card which is created, which is SNIC, which you can call it as secondary NIC card, and it has got its own IP address, right? And then this network interface card, what we'll do is we'll go and assign it to our VM, which is in the deallocated state. So as I said yesterday, to assign a network interface card, your VM should be in deallocated state or stopped state, stopped deallocated, right? So even if it is in a normal stopped state, you will not be able to assign the network interface card. So you need to make sure that it is in a stopped and deallocated state to assign an additional network interface card to your virtual machine. Okay. So where do I, how do I do that? Go to the virtual machine, go to the networking, and here you see an option called attach or detach network interface cards, right? Now you have only one network interface card attached, which is test VM 1395. That is the default name that which your virtual machine has picked. Now for you to attach an additional interface card, what you need to do is you need to just go to the attach NIC card, and then you see the list of NIC cards, network interface cards, which are available for you to assign. Okay, so just select that and assign it. If you don't have an NIC card, you can create it from here as well, right? You see an option called create network interface card. Rather going here and getting into the network interface card blade and other stuff, from here also you can do it from here also, right? So let us attach the one that whatever we have. Then you should be able to see two network interface cards here, right? So one the existing one, and the other one is the secondary network interface card that which we just attached, right? So you can see there are two network interface cards. Now if you want to detach it, you can just go and detach the network interface card by selecting whichever the card you want to detach from the virtual machine, right? Now this requirement will come when you want to have a network connectivity to your virtual machine to different networks. One could be in 10.x series, the other one could be in 192 series, or one network interface card might be pointing to your internet and the other one might be an internal communication, right? Or you want to have the production environment connectivity or normal user connectivity through let us say test VM1 1395 network interface card, then you go and put that in that network, and then you want to use this secondary network interface as a backup, you know, to flow the backup traffic and so on. Then you configure that with that IP and subnet, right? So based on your requirement, there could be one or more network interface cards that might be needed, for you to kind of uh, attain or meet your requirements, right? So this is how you can assign multiple network interface card. And again, each network interface card is an independent resource, right? And each network interface card will get an IP address, not your operating system, right? So the moment you create a network interface card, the IP address is automatically assigned based on the subnet that which it is part of. Because this subnet has got an IP range of 10.x, that's the reason you are seeing 10.x IP address assigned to this. Now, if it is part of a subnet which has got a address prefix assigned as 192, then it will pick the IP address from 192 series. Okay, so we will be discussing about this IP address prefix and so on, maybe in tomorrow or day after tomorrow's class. But for now, just understand that every subnet will have a range of IP addresses that will be picked by your network interface cards, which are tagged to that particular subnet. Okay, subnet will have a range of IP addresses. Your network interface card will be tagged to a subnet, and that's why they pick the IP address from the range which your subnet is assigned, right? That's how you can assign multiple network interface cards. Okay, so that ends assigning an additional network interface cards, and we also seen expansion of the disks and so on, right? Let us move on with other topic. Now, what is the size of the VM that which you selected? You selected here, it is, let us say that DS1V2, which is one CPU and 3.5 GB of memory. Now there is a change in your requirement. You need more memory than whatever you had allocated earlier. That means you have to change the size of the virtual machine from standard DS1V2 to some other size that which fits for your requirement. Okay, so that can be done by going to the option called size here. Okay, so when you go to the size option, you will see all the different sizes. To clear the filter, you can see all the different sizes that which can be used to resize your virtual machine, right? So when you resize the virtual machine, then definitely there will be an outage, right? So resizing the virtual machine, VM needs outage, right? So you need to make sure that you have an outage, a change window or whatever you call it as in place to change the virtual machine size. Now it's very simple, straightforward. Let us say if I want to go with a VM which is okay, so 4 disks. DS1 V2 is what it is. Let me say that, let me go with DS1, then just select and click on resize, right? So what it does is it basically powers off and powers on the virtual machine and changes the size of the virtual machine, right? So what we are trying to say here is, yes, you can go and change the size of the VMs, and accordingly there will be a change in the cost of your billing or whatever, right? So whatever the billing, there will be change in the billing because you are changing the size of the virtual machine. Okay, so that's how you can change the size of a VM. You can do a change of multiple VMs by putting all these things in a PowerShell script, that which we will start from tomorrow, right? You can see there's a change in the size of the virtual machine. If you go to the disks, sizes or size, right? You can see this is peak, which means that there's a change in the size of the virtual machine, right? Or you can also go to the overview and you can see from here also, right? DS1, it was earlier, it's version 2, now it is DS1. Okay, so that this is how you can change the size of the VM. Okay, small concept, but it is needed. So let us move on. Now there is something called as uh, let us say that you forgot a password of your local administrator. Now you have an option here to go and change the password, right? So the idea that what I am using here is, or at least the idea that what we have internally is, this is a local admin ID, right? So Vijay, which I created when I was provisioning the virtual machine. Now if you forgot your local administrator ID, you can go and reset it from the option here, that whatever you have, that is password reset option, which will be useful in case if you forgot your local administrator password. Okay, so that can also be done. Okay, so another important thing. Now let us go to a boot diagnostics. Somebody was asking the other day, can we get into the console of the virtual machine, like how we do in our VMware or Hyper-V world? Now you will not have access to the console, but what you have is, it will, if you see it in the boot diagnostics, you see the current state of your virtual machine, right? So by seeing this picture, you can understand whether it is up or not, whether it is struck at what do you call boot, what is the current state, and it refreshes periodically, right? Now to have this by default will not be enabled, but you have to have this boot diagnostics enabled, right? So you have to enable this boot diagnostics, which will be the option you get when you are provisioning the virtual machine, right? So boot diagnostics need to be enabled, and this boot diagnostics need something called a storage space, which we call it a storage account, to store the required information, right? That's why you have a test VJ123, which is a storage account, right? So if you off, then you will not be able to see those what do you call screenshots or whatever, right? Whatever you see here, if you are on, then only you will be able to see the diagnostics. Okay, now this is another important part or place where you can see current state of your VM, whether it is up or not, whether it is struck at the boot. If you are not able to ping or access, you can just go and check the status of this. Okay, now sometimes we will not be able to we want to connect to the command prompt. Let us say that the server is up and you want to do let us say you installed a role or feature. Okay, so you install some role or feature, or some driver installed, some role or feature, right? You install, or you install some drivers that time, or some software you install. So that time you may have a problem in connecting to this VM. So what that time what you can do is, you have an option here called as serial console, right? Now this serial console will help you to connect to the VM through a COM port, right? So If you worked at least 10 12 years back, we used to have a serial port through which we used to connect to the physical servers, right? The same way Microsoft has provided a facility for us to connect to the serial console, okay, using a serial console option here, right? Now, how do I connect? I can connect to this using some commands which we will be seeing now. And using this console, you can connect to the command prompt of the machine, right? You can connect to the command prompt of the machine. So using serial console, you can connect to command prompt. Now it is almost like you getting access to the recovery console or the command prompt kind of stuff, right? So from here, if you have some changes that needs to be done, let us say that you want to rename a file, or you want to rename certain registry key, or you want to uninstall some feature, or install something. So all these things can be done, right? From this command prompt, you can also move to PowerShell. If you want to get into the PowerShell, you can also get into the PowerShell, right? So the basic things that whatever you feel can be done using the command prompt can be done from here to fix if you have any issues. Okay, let us see what is that we have here, right? This is the basic command. Ch is the basic command, right? So here you have to create a channel, right, and connect to that channel, and through that command prompt channel you try to work on the whatever the troubleshooting step that which you need, right? So you have each channel will have a number, so you can see it, each channel will have a number, CHSI hash, right? So switch a channel to its number, so every channel will have a number assigned to it, correct? So let us quickly get into create a channel. For that I just need to type cmd, right? So it creates a channel called cmd001, right? A new channel has been created with the name cmd001. Now how do I connect to this channel? You can see ch-si and the channel number, right? ch-si and then channel number, right? cmd0001 will have a channel number 1. If cmd002 channel is created, then it will have a channel number 2, and so on, right? So let me connect to that channel. So how do I connect? ch-si, right, and the channel number. What is the channel number that which I am connecting to? 1, right? Then press another key, then it will ask you username and password. Okay, now this will be your local administrator username, or if it is joined to domain, you can also use your domain name, provided if it is on the network. Okay, now the next step, it will ask for the domain name. Because we didn't add this machine to a domain, this will be blank, right? And then the password. So whatever the local administrator password we gave, that is the password that which we will be using here, right? So it attempts to authenticate, and then you are at the command prompt of that particular machine. If you go and type the host name, then you will see the test VM2, which is nothing but your virtual machine command prompt, right? Now from here, if you want to go to a PowerShell, you can straight away get into the PowerShell as well. And whatever the troubleshooting steps that which are needed, right, whatever the troubleshooting steps that which are needed, you can go and perform from here. So we are not going to cover that part, but you can, if you want to install some Windows feature, right, let us say install Windows feature, right, web, let us say web, oh, okay, this will be little slow. Right, let us say that you are installing, or you want to uninstall, then you can uninstall, or if you want to rename the file, you can use rename, or copy some file from some other directory to this, and so on. You can do all those things. Hopefully this yeah, so you can run the or install or whatever the commands that which you want to execute, you can execute from here, right? So serial console is one of the useful tool, at least to troubleshoot in some areas that can be used. Okay, so this is about the serial console. If you guys have any questions, we can take, otherwise we'll move forward from there. Any questions? Okay, I'll take it as no. Then we'll get into some other options that which are there here. Let us look at configuration. So within this configuration, this is a new feature that which is introduced, just-in-time access, right? So if you want to give access to a person only, specific time, or only one time you want to give access. So those type of situations, this option we will be using, and we will see this in detail about this in our identity and access management, which will be our access management part. So this is another new feature that which is there, which is just-in-time option. Okay, now what else is left here? Okay, export as template. So export as a template will give you different for different formats of your code. So the VM that whatever you had created, all the settings of that VM are converted into either a JSON code. This whatever you are seeing is a JSON code, or it is also available in a PowerShell. You can see it, and that is also available in .NET, Ruby, and Azure CLI. Now, why and how this is useful? You can export this entire code, right? You can download this, and using this template, you can deploy the other virtual machines, which means when you are converting or downloading this template and using this as a base template to deploy the, when I say the base template, this code, okay, the code that whatever you have, using that code, you will be deploying additional virtual machines, so that you need not have to fill all those entries that which we filled, right? So we will call that as ARM templates. This in ARM templates we will be using this JSON code, that which we will be seeing in one of our classes. But for now, what we need to understand is you can export the configuration of this virtual machine, and then you can later redeploy or use this code to deploy at a later point of time, or you can modify this code and deploy the other virtual machines. And this is available in JSON format and Azure CLI, if you see it, a PowerShell, right, .NET and Ruby, right? So this is the importance of your export template, where you can download, or by using this template itself, you can deploy, the other machines. You can see it. This takes me to the deployment page, right? So likewise, you can deploy virtual machines using the template that whatever you have here. Of course, you can, if you want to copy this and want to write your own code, you can also do that, right? But this template option that whatever you see is helpful for those type of situations. Okay, now so this is about the templates. There are a couple of other options here within this which we didn't discuss, but we will be coming back to them. Whatever are needed for today, we had discussed. There are some dependencies with others, like backup, which is again dependent on backup concepts, and disaster recovery, update manager, patching, and other stuff. Okay, auto shutdown, right? So let us say that you want to shut down this machine every day at some time, right? You can go and schedule it. But what you see here is you don't see the option to auto power on, right? So it is only allowing you to power off. But the question arises, then how do I power it on? Let us say every after business hours, after 7, I want to power it off, and this machine should be up early in the morning at or in the morning at 8 or 9 o'clock. So you should be putting some schedule in place to power it on, but you can power it off from here or shut down from here. Okay. So what people will do is they will include both shutdown and okay, so both shutdown as well as power on options, right? They can do it using a script that can be scheduled within the Azure. Okay, that we'll be seeing in one of our classes. But what we need to do is, what we need to understand here is there is an option to auto power off your virtual machine from your console itself. Okay, within the virtual machine settings. Okay. Now, these are the few important settings within the virtual machines. Okay. So let us, if you have any questions, please ask before we move into the next topic. Any questions?
Hi Vijay, we can't change it online like resources,
We
your memory or CPU.
no, that option is not available.
So
So
compressor,
you are saying that when live, when the machine is live, you want to increase the resources of the machine.
correct.
Yeah, no, that is not there. That's not possible.
And also while selecting sizes, so we can't go our customize sizes like I want only changing the memory like 1 GB. So we can do our customized sizes.
Customized sizes are not there, but what I feel is just go and look at the sizes that whatever you have. Definitely, if you are looking for memory optimization, then there are multiple sizes within the memory optimization. So I think the way how they create had put the sizes in place is to meet the requirements, because there is a kind of mapping to the cost, right? So they have standard sizes which are defined. So you don't have an option to go and select this is the size that what I want. So we will be using the sizes that whatever they had provided.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So what is the difference between PowerShell CMD separately and using the serial console? So serial console is an option that which you use to connect to the machine if you are not able to log into the server itself, right? So you are not able to get into the server, uh, then you go to the serial console. Otherwise, you log into the server using RDP, and from there you can normally take PowerShell or GUI or whatever, right? If it is Windows, and if it is Linux, then you will be using some SSH or some other way of accessing, right? So there is a difference between console, serial console, and PowerShell. PowerShell is an operating system inbuilt. This serial console, you get it from the Azure portal itself, right? Which is a COM connectivity or COM port connectivity to your virtual machine at the back end. Okay, right. So let us get into another interesting topic, which is called as availability sets. Availability sets. Now, before we get into the availability sets, what we need to understand is all these VMs that whatever we are provisioning, or all the resources that whatever you provision on Azure will sit either on, if it is an application, it will sit on a virtual machine, right? If it is virtual machine itself, then that will be on your hypervisor, right? Hypervisor. So applications or virtual machines, applications anyway will sit on VMs, which in turn will sit on your hypervisor. Now, for those who don't know what a hypervisor is a small software, or you can call it as OS component, which sits on a physical hardware, right? Which sits on your physical hardware. On top of that, let us say this is your hardware. right? On top of this, you'll put a software or a hypervisor component, right? And this hypervisor will help you or enable you to create virtual machines, which will act as a physical layer itself, right? Multiple virtual machines on top, right? That's how a hypervisor solution will work. And what are the popular hypervisors? If you are talking about VMware, it is VMware ESXi, right? Now, if you are talking about Microsoft, they have their own hypervisor called as Hyper-V, right? And some Zen server and so on, right? And Oracle has their own hypervisors. So multiple hypervisors in the market, right? So all your virtual machines will sit on a hypervisor, and so as in your Azure, okay? So the VM that whatever you are provisioning here, right? All the VMs that whatever you are provisioning here will sit on a hypervisor, which in turn will sit on a hardware. And we don't have access to that part. That is entirely isolated. You just get a layer through which you can provision the VMs, but underlying infrastructure you will not be able to see, and you will not be able to know on which hypervisor and so on this particular VM is sitting, right? Now there could be a situation where we may end up, let us say that I have these three machines and all these are part of a web application, right? Let us say that they're all part of a web application. Now think about a situation where all these VMs are sitting on a single hardware. All these VMs are sitting on a single hardware. Because you don't have control, you don't know where they are sitting, whether they are sitting on a same hardware layer or they're sitting in a different hardware layer. Now, if the situation is so, and all these three VMs are part of a web pool, if this hardware, whatever you have here, right, goes down, then all your VMs are down, right? There's a possibility. There's a possibility. The hardware failure. Now, to avoid this, what we need to make sure that when we are deploying the virtual machine, there should be a mechanism or method which will allow to put these virtual machines into different hardware layers or hardware stacks, right? So that could be one possibility. The other possibility is, let us say that Microsoft, we all know that all the hardware layer or hypervisor layer will also have some updates to be done. If it is hardware firmware updates, right? Or it can be hypervisor updates. Let us think so, situation. So that the one that what we discussed earlier is unplanned outage, right? That is an unplanned outage, which means there could be a hardware failure, there could be a disk failure and so on, which may take out your, or storage failure, which may take out your VMs and an outage, right? That is unplanned outage. Now there could be a planned outage where Microsoft does some updates onto their hypervisor or the firmware updates to the hardware layer. Now let us think they are rebooting this entire stuff at a time, the hypervisor or the hardware or whatever. Now that time all these VMs whatever you are here are also taken off, will also reboot, because they are all sitting on the same layer, right? Now to avoid this, what you have to do is you have to put them into something called as availability sets, right? You have to put them into something called as availability sets. Now how and in what way the availability set will help us to get away from these situations, right? So before we get there, let us say that what are the different options that you have within the availability set. Within availability set, you have something called as fault domain. and you also have something called as update domain, right? Fault domain and update, right? You have something called as fault domain and update domain. Fault domain is basically related to your hardware, hardware layer or rack, you can call it as. When you put 3 VMs in a fault domain, based on how many fault domains you have, that we'll be seeing in some time, based on how many fault domains you have, let us say you have 3 fault domains, right? You have 3 fault domains, right? You have 3 fault domains, and you are creating 3 VMs, let us say, and each VM will be in each fault domain. So VM1 will be in fault domain 1, VM2 will be in fault domain 2, right? And VM3 will be in fault domain 3. So each fault domain is nothing but a hardware or rack. Each fault domain you can think it as a server within a rack. Now fault domain 1 goes off, let us say. You still have your VMs running in fault domain 2, which is a different hardware, fault domain 3, which is again a different hardware. So at any point of time, even one of your physical hardware goes down, you still have another 2 physical hardwares on which your entire application stack is, or pool of application is running. So VM2 and VM3 part of the web pool are still up and running, catering the services of the business, right? So what we need to understand in the fault domain is a logical stuff which is related to your hardware layer. Based on the number of fault domains you create, those many layers of hardware can be divided. Let us quickly show that in a diagram for you, so that it will be easy for us to understand. Now let us say I created 3 fault domains. This is server 1, this is server 2, this is server 3, or you can also call it as rack. Now let us say this is FD1, right? FD2 and FD3. So when you create the fault domain at the back end, it maps itself to a hardware, right? That's what it will happen. Now let us say you are creating a virtual machine 1. That time what it will do, first virtual machine whatever you create, it will put in fault domain 1, right? First virtual machine whatever you create, it will put in fault domain 1. The second virtual machine whatever you create, it will put in fault domain 2, right? It will put in fault domain 2, and so as the third one, right? Fault domain 3 will put in fault domain 3, right? So likewise you are spreading your VMs across different physical hardware. Now let us say you created only 3, or let us say you have only 3 fault domains and you have 10 virtual machines. Then what it will do, the fourth one whatever you create, it will again come back into fault domain 1, right? Again it will come back into fault domain, and 5th, 6th, and so on. So it will be cyclic. It will be cycle accommodating those VMs across the number of fault domains you have, right? So that's how you can put your virtual machines in different fault domains, which means that you are putting your virtual machines on different hardware within the Azure environment. Okay. Now this is the fault domain. The second one that what we discussed is the update domain. Update domain is also a logical feature, you can call it as. Now these VMs which are part of multiple fault domains will also be part of your, what do you call it as, update domain, right? Let us say that this is update domain 1, right? And this is also part of update domain 1. And the others two, whatever you see here, are part of update domain 2. Let us think so. Now, when Microsoft patches any environment, they will patch update domain wise, which means they will reboot all the servers, or they will reboot the environment which is in update domain 1. After that is successful and it is up, then only they will move into update domain 2. That's what the logic at the back end they have when they do any changes. When you put your virtual machines in multiple update domains, what it means that even if one update domain is taken off, you still have VMs running in the other update domain, and providing the services required. So what we are attaining here is, in the second part, which is update domain, which is basically for the planned outage, you are creating a logical component called as update domain. You are putting your VMs across multiple update domains. And what is the benefit you are getting? Because Microsoft updates their resources based on update domains, they will take off one update domain at once. Once it is up and running, then only they will go to the second update domain and so on. That's the reason you will get that high availability, because you are spreading your VMs across multiple update domains, right? So the two important things that whatever we need to know when it comes to the availability sets is fault domains and update domains. Fault domains is your purely related to your unplanned outage or some hardware failure. And what we are doing, you are creating multiple fault domains, which means that you are putting your VMs across different physical hardware. What you are attaining doing so is you are making sure that even if one hardware layer or one hardware device goes down, you still have your VMs up and running because you have a pool of VMs sitting on the other hardware. The second is the update domain. Update domain is a logical stuff, which again, which is related to the planned maintenance or outage. Microsoft puts the updates or takes down the servers based on something called as update domains. And you create multiple update domains and span your VMs across multiple update domains. Even if one update domain is not available, the VMs running on the other update domain will be able to serve the application availability requirements. Okay, so this is what is your fault domain and update domain. Okay, now let us quickly go to the portal and see where do I find that and how do I configure it. Okay, let us go to, so like how we do for any service, you can go and search here in the search box. Will get availability sets, right? Get something called as availability set. Now you have to create an availability set before you create a virtual machine. So that is very important. What it means, the VMs which are already there, in our case we have 3 VMs, right? I cannot add existing VMs to an availability set. So before I create a virtual machine, and if my solution talks, I need to put that into different availability update domains and fault domains. First thing that what I need to do is I need to go and create an availability set. Then tag your VM to the availability set, right? So that's how we will be doing. So what is that we need to understand? We need to understand here is existing VMs cannot be moved to availability sets, right? Existing VMs cannot be moved to the availability sets. So before you create VMs, and if you want to put that into an availability set, create a availability set. And when you create the availability set, you will select how many fault domains I need and how many update domains I need, right? There is again a minimum and maximum value which we will be seeing now. So these are few important things. So VMs which are already there up and running, you cannot move to availability set if it is not part of the availability set. Now, what is the solution for that? You need to remove the configuration, and using the disk that whatever you have for this VM, create a new VM with the existing disk and add it to the availability set. That can be done, but that is not available in this portal, but that has to be done using some scripts, right? But whatever we talk when it comes to the portal, from here I cannot go and edit something and move this VM to an availability set. It is not possible. Okay, let us go to the availability set again. Availability sets. Right, click on add, which for to create an availability set. Let us say I'll name it as VM availability set, right? And like any other resource, you will have a subscription, you will have a resource group and location. Now here you see fault domains and update domains. Default fault domains are 2, and you can go maximum of 3, not beyond that. So what is the maximum fault domains you can have? You can have 3, and the default one is 2. Okay, by default it will be 2. Similarly, the default update domains are 5, and then you can go up to 20, right? So based on your requirement. So if I have 10 virtual machines, if I select 3 fault domains, that means these 10 virtual machines will be accommodated in those 3 fault domains, like VM 1, 2, 3, and again 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, right? So fault domain 1 will have a list of VMs, fault domain 2 will have a list of VMs, and so on, right? And similarly, you can take a call how many update domains you need, right?
So for example, when you say the fault domains are 3, so the physical servers, there are 3 physical rack servers.
Exactly.
That's what.
Right.
So then, how about this update domains when it is 20? Like.
Okay. So let us say that. So again, what is the total number of VMs that which you have will help you to select how many update domains. So we are not asking you to select 20, right? So based on my requirement, I can go and put. Let us say that I have 10 web servers. Okay. Let us think. So I have 10 web servers. At any point of time, I need 5 web servers to be available. Think the situation like that. Okay, at any point of time, I need 5 web servers to be available. Now, based on that calculation, you can go and select how many update domains you need, right? Now, if you go and select 3 update domains, which means these 5 machines will be accommodated in those 3, in those 3 update domains, right? Now you identify how many VMs are available when one update domain goes down. Will it meet my availability requirements or capacity requirements at any point of time, right? So those are all the calculations that which we need to do before we go and select that number there, right? So it is not just putting here some number, but we need to also understand what is the best solution, what is the best number that which is to be selected here, right? So that all comes when you are designing your environment, that where you will kind of take a call, right? So this is what I need, and these are the number of fault domains, and so on, right? And also depends on the criticality of the application that which is running. Correct?
So basically, in a real-time scenario, we cannot see in our real-time scenario, like if any new application is coming, we adjust in some of the virtual machines, whatever it is running on. So in this feature, like we cannot club new applications. For each application servers, we have to build a separate fault domains.
No, you can add existing availability set to a virtual machine, right? So what we are doing is create an availability set which defines how many fault domains and how many update domains. That is point 1. When you are creating your virtual machine, you tag this availability set to your virtual machines that we will be seeing in some time, today or not tomorrow, which tells, okay, for that virtual machine, it is because it is tagged to this availability set, it will go and fall based on how the present availability set VMs are. Based on that, it will go and fall. So to answer your question, it is a best practice to have availability set application wise. if it is not meeting general availability set, whatever you created, right? So based on your requirement, the number of availability sets will also change, will also be there, right? Like VM availability set 1, 2, 3, and 4 project wise or application wise, right? And another important thing, if it is a multi-tier application, you should also think about that. If it is a multi-tier application, like web server, database server, and an application server, so you have to even take that into consideration when you design this availability set, right? So all those things, we need to be considering before we go and decide, for this database server, these many availability sets, and so on. For web servers, these many, and so on, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So what it does is basically you're creating an availability set now. Okay. So let me go back to the default one. Let's put 5 here. I may not need 5 also, and then 2 here. And then I'll create a availability set. Right. So you defined and you created an availability set, but we didn't tag this availability set to any of the virtual machine, right? So what we have to do when you create a virtual machine, there is an option to assign an availability set, right? And when you select the availability set, that whatever you created, then your VM will go and fall into that particular availability set, right? So if you go to the virtual machines, let me click on this option of add virtual machine. Then you will see here in the availability options, right here, you'll see availability set. And within that availability set, you should see all the list of availability sets that whatever you have in place, because it is still in creation process. You're not able to see it, but you'll get that list of what you call it as availability sets that whatever are available, right? And then once you put that virtual machine into the availability set, then it will fall in one of the fault domain, and it will fall in one of the update domain, right? So that we will see tomorrow. We'll continue with this fault and update domain, and we'll create 4 or 5 virtual machines within the availability set. Then you will be able to see, under which availability set this particular, under which fault domain this VM is falling. If you have 3 VMs, right? Let us think so. Then it should be, if you have 3 VMs, if you have 3 fault domains, then it should fall in 0, 1, 2, likewise the update domains also. That practically we will see tomorrow. Okay, so I'll show you how to check in which fault domain that VM is, and based on the number of fault domains or update domains we have. Okay, so if you have any questions, then we'll take.
So we have this I mean fault domain in actually virtual machine world is like fault tolerance. And how about DRS? Like, do we have that feature in this? Load balancing.
Yeah, so the underlying infrastructure, which is Hyper-V, so the way how they designed, and we are sitting on top of it, right? So with some Azure stack or some layer of Azure, right? So all these physical hardware is again on top of the hypervisor, which are clustered, right? And and we that is taken care by your service provider itself. In our case, it is Azure, right? So it's their responsibility to make sure that they have enough configuration capacity and high availability solutions and so on, for us to have this availability, right? So but still there could be the chances, right? That's why we are going and putting all these into fault domains and update domains. That's why Microsoft has given that feature. But to answer your question, we'll not have visibility to that, but yes, that configuration is there below you, for the hypervisor, that whatever we are using, right? Any other questions, guys? Okay, so if no questions, we'll stop here and we'll catch up tomorrow then. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.